So this year, 2019, as a denomination, forgot the word for a minute, we're delving into what's known as the 10 prophetic justice principles from Reverend Dr. James A. Forbes II. And the whole reason we're doing it is because we're trying to determine what are the things that we have to adopt, the sort of the frame of reference we have to adopt in order to strengthen our personal and collective abilities to make changes in our world, to create that world that works for everyone. What do we have to be thinking about? And so, March, we're exploring the second principle, which is be truthful in facts and motives. And so today we start right at the foundation of all that, which is with one of our community values, integrity. The word integrity comes from the Latin word integer, which we all know means whole, right? An integer is a whole number. Integer as an adjective or a descriptor means wholeness, complete. There's a great little blog post I ran across by a woman named So Young Kang, and she wrote, integrity requires an inner sense of wholeness and a consistency of character. When you're in integrity, people should be able to visibly see it through your actions, words, decisions, methods, and outcomes. When you are whole and consistent, there is only one you. There is only one you. You bring the same wherever you are, regardless of the circumstance. And you know, I mean, that's allowing. Obviously, we have to allow for things like people like me who can stand in front of all of you and speak to all of you and socialize with all of you, and then I have to run and hide for a while because I'm one of those ambivert people who I can be social for a while and then I need alone time. But that doesn't change from day to day. It's always that way with me, right? We try to be consistent, so there's only one of us. And I think that's as good a definition of integrity as I know. It means that we come from our wholeness rather than our fear. We come from our wholeness rather than those old feelings of brokenness that we carry around. We come from our wholeness rather than those tattered pieces of used to be that we continue to carry around with us. We all have them, right? There's something we refuse to let go of, but we don't let that steer. I have come to believe that integrity is a lifelong process, a never-ending becoming. It's not someplace I arrive and stay there forever. But I know that I live in more integrity now than I have in the past, but I'm forever uncovering pieces of myself that are out of integrity. Places that are scared or reactive, or places where I still have a sense I'm not enough, or I live from an old pattern instead of from the wholeness that's the truth about me and the truth about each one of us. We are whole. There's nothing missing. Somehow we find that hard to believe. And I think it's this whole human divine thing at the same time, you know, is it's tricky. That's one of the tricks, is to not be swayed by what appears to be something that's imperfect and forget our inner wholeness. I just keep trying to recognize that it's an ongoing process. And I just keep trying when I have an opportunity to sort of step in front of the old way of thinking, to step in front of the fear, to step in front of the defensiveness and do something different. Do something different. That's the process for me of integrity. It's the process of realizing when I'm out of integrity and choosing to say or do something different that's closer to the truth of who I am. Years ago, I had a terrific problem with making up little tiny lies to make myself look better. It's like every word out of my mouth was an untruth. And I corrected that by finally having the courage to step in front of it and say, at first, I just lied, let me tell you what the truth is. Which is really embarrassing, but it worked. It worked. After a while, I stopped making up lies to make myself look better, right? Sometimes I will catch myself wanting to be sarcastic because that was the way I grew up, and I have to step out in front of that and either speak kindness or say nothing at all. If I'm justifying a decision, you know, we can justify almost anything, right? I really need this 5th pair of boots. I do. I need them. I have to step out in front of that and ask myself, is this really a good decision? If I have the money and it would feel really good, that'd be all right, right? But if I'm doing it, if I'm justifying, if I really can't afford this, or it would mean I didn't pay something else, maybe I better think again. I have to step in front of it and seek to find out what's really happening. It's a process. So, last week I taught a class, week before, I taught one of the ministerial classes on ministerial counseling, and we were actually talking about communication skills. And one of them was so brilliant that I've really been thinking about it a lot. You know, these are skills that I was teaching so that we could be better counselors and better at our jobs generally and better people. But one of them is so good that I want to pass it on to you because I've come to realize it's not just a communication skill, it's an integrity skill. And it's called fogging. The name implies confusion, but it's just the opposite, actually. The idea is that when someone criticizes you, you just agree. You just agree with them. Just agree to what's true or what may be true. So when somebody calls you out and says, "You never listen to me," you say, "You might be right." 3 little words. Maybe you're right. Like you add those to the chorus there, right? When somebody says, "You didn't call me when I needed you," you just say, "You're right, I didn't." There's more to it than that, but that's where it begins. It's simply agreeing without argument or defensiveness to the part of the criticism that is or may be true. And the person who came up with this idea, his name is Manuel Smith, and he called it fogging because a fog bank has no resistance. It doesn't fight back, right? You can't throw something at it and there's no hard surface that thing can bounce back to you so you can pick it up and throw it again. A fog bank simply is, right? And it gives us the opportunity when we can do that to take a breath and lean into our own wholeness and ask for more information. It gives us the opportunity to try and understand what this communication is really about. It's not about criticizing us generally. And it gives us the opportunity to not be defensive. That's the biggest part of it right there, to not be defensive. Instead of being defensive, we become curious when we admit, they might be right. What part of this is true? What part of it might be true? Certainly it's true from their perspective, is it not? When somebody says something like that, it is true for them to some degree or another. So when we say, you might be right, and then we ask the next question, we're curious instead of, oh yeah, well let me tell you about you, which is what part of us wants to do, isn't it? We want to defend ourselves. It takes a little courage. It takes a little courage at first because we step out in front of our need to fight back, to be defensive. We step out in front of our need to justify ourselves. And we step into a place of integrity, of wholeness, where we can say, you might be right. It is correct from their viewpoint. There's some truth in it from their viewpoint. But most importantly, at every single moment, we have the choice to get bitter or get better. And if we want to get better, we have to stay away from the things that lead us to bitterness, don't we? When we come from our own sense of unworthiness or our self-defensiveness, what happens? The conflict escalates. But when we say, you might be right, can you tell me specifically what I did that caused you this pain? You're hearing the pain, and you're acknowledging it. And you're living from your own integrity instead of from, man, I'm going to show you. You know, I don't know about you, but when I get criticized, I have two responses: fight or flee. And fighting is me thinking about what I'm going to say to cut the knees out from under that other person. Fleeing is making up a story so I look like I didn't do anything wrong. And neither one of those is true. They're both full of misinformation. I would use a stronger word, but I'm talking about myself. Be nice, wait. They're both full of beans. Yeah, that other word. The integrity lies in saying, this is an opportunity for me to learn something. You know? You might be right. Can you say more about it? I might just learn how I come across to someone that's not how I intend to come across. Or I might just learn how someone views me and how I have damaged our relationship. And I might learn how to make it better. We acknowledge that our conduct may have caused somebody else pain. We get to continue the conversation. And very often we find it's not about the thing we're being criticized about at all. It's about the other person's circumstance at the moment. Sometimes they're looking for somebody to stick on, you know, because they're in pain. But regardless, there's something in it for us to learn. We get to get better instead of bitter. And the most miraculous part of it is the feeling of integrity that comes from just staying in control of yourself and saying, you might be right. Can we talk more? It's huge. It is huge. It was so... I read this book, 5 months ago, and I thought, wow, that feels really right to me. And so I started to practice it. And sometimes I will still catch myself saying, but you might be right. You know, you're probably right. I bet you I could do that better. I still catch myself going into the mode, but I pull back out and decide in that moment to be present, to be open, and to ask for more information. It's amazing. It's amazing. It takes courage because we have to choose to let go of our need to defend ourselves. What is there to defend anyway? Right? What is there to defend? Nothing. Nothing. We have to, what it requires is that we be a teeny little bit vulnerable. But I have to ask you something. How vulnerable are you when you're red in the face and yelling back at somebody trying to justify yourself? That's pretty vulnerable, isn't it? It's actually a much more comfortable vulnerability to be able to say, you know, you might be right, and I apologize if I hurt your feelings. Can we talk more about it? Can you tell me more? You know, that kind of vulnerability is one that comes straight from the heart, not from the defenses. And it's so much less vulnerable a position than being out of control. It truly is. We have to muster up that little bit of courage to be open-hearted vulnerable. But that's when we get reunited with our power. You know, we are vulnerable because we're human, and we are powerful because we're loving. When we get into the place of being vulnerable and loving, we are at the peak moment for our own transformation. And if we do that repeatedly, the transformation starts to happen. We have to muster up that little bit of courage. But we're not ragged. We're not aching because somebody poked us in one of our tender spots. We are in a place of power. So I just keep trying to recognize that, and I keep trying to do that whenever I get the opportunity. Try it the next time you're criticized by your spouse or your kid or your boss or anybody else. Just try saying either you're right, if it's right, or you might be right, if it's possible. Then ask for more information. Here's a little example that came from this book. The husband says, "Why do we have to spend every Sunday with your mother? This is really a drag. she treats you like you don't have a brain in your head. And the wife says, you know, you're right. I have been spending a lot of time with my mom lately. Sometimes she does put me down. I get the sense that you're really annoyed by that. And he says, I wonder when you lost your courage. Why didn't you make your own decisions instead of always doing what she decides to do? The wife says, you're probably right. I could be stronger. I could be less influenced by my mother's decision. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a bind between what she wants and what you want. What we have there is a fogging, followed by reflecting the feelings of the husband back to him, fogging again, and then speaking from her own true feelings. Sometimes I feel like a bind. You know, this conversation goes on from there to a real resolution. Instead of just, you stop picking on my mother. You know, you treat me like I don't have a brain. I mean, it could have been an ugly fight. You know, it could have been an ugly fight. There's an openness to an honest sharing of feelings rather than just a constantly escalating game of I have to protect my position at any cost because I feel guilty or ashamed or scared or vulnerable or whatever else. There's a deep integrity in this response. There's a deep integrity. Your criticism may have merit. What lies underneath it? Choose to get better instead of bitter. It's very liberating. Very liberating. Because it's not about guilt and it's not about shame. The guilt and the shame are the things that give rise to defensiveness. This is about integrity. It's about integrity, freedom from denial, integrity of our actions and our words and our deeds and our feelings and the facts and motives under the conversation. This is pretty courageous integrity, and it does work at home as well as at work. If somebody criticizes you at work because you didn't get something done on time, just say, you know, I was a little late, or you might be right, maybe that happened, let's explore further. You know, you'll probably get to the bottom of what's really going on, often a misperception or a lack of complete communication or something happening to the other party that's causing them pain. May or may not have anything to do with you, right? Even if the criticism is completely true, as I said before, from wholeness, there is nothing to defend. We, as whole, perfect, complete human beings, screw up sometimes. Yeah, every single one of us. There's not a person in here who hasn't made a mistake. We got to become okay with that, you know? And what we got to become okay with is saying, I made a mistake. How can I clean it up? When I hurt somebody's feelings, how can I repair the relationship? When I make up a story about myself to make myself look better, how can I restore the trust in the relationship? And the only way we ever find out is by being willing to say, you know, you might be right. I might have screwed up. How can I make it better? And every time we do that, what we're doing is tapping into what Ernest Holmes talked about in the reading at the beginning. The universe is a place of absolute integrity. The universe is a place of absolutely perfect integrity. And the universe responds to us. The integrity of the universe responds to the integrity of our acts and brings about more wholeness, a greater sense of integrity. And because integrity is the nature of spirit, of the universe, of evolution, see, nothing works without it, right? The system breaks down when the integrity of a part of the system gets compromised. Our wholeness breaks down when we refuse to acknowledge our own integrity. Everything revolves around integrity, whether it's a cell or a human being or a government or the whole world. Integrity is really fundamental, which is why I was so pleased to see it rise to the top, to almost the top of our level, our set of community values. We sense that integrity is really important. It's important to us living vital and happy lives. it's important to us being a really transformative community. Because without integrity in our own lives, how can we trust the integrity of the universe? I cheat. Why shouldn't God, right? I mean, it's kind of that kind of thing. Without faith in the integrity of the universe, why bother to try and change our own lives? Those two go hand in hand, I think. As our founder Ernest Holmes reminds us again, what we are looking for, we are looking with, and we are looking at. Heaven is lost merely for the lack of a perception of harmony. Hell is the phantom of a morbid imagination, the phantom abode of a morbid imagination. Heaven and hell are states of consciousness. And that in my mind, the foundation of heaven is integrity, and the foundation of hell is self-defensiveness and pain and conflict, constant conflict. So we get to choose, right? We can either get better or we can get bitter. We can choose heaven or we can choose hell. We can step toward our own wholeness or we can hang out in our brokenness. The choice is ours. When we live lives of integrity, we bring that integrity into our doings together. We move into greater awareness of our own wholeness. We bring greater congruence to our lives and to the life of our community. And there is this call of the soul to be congruent, to live in integrity, to be both humanly vulnerable and powerfully loving. And that, my friends, is transformation. When we can be both humanly vulnerable and powerfully loving at the same time.